Friends, today we are going to talk about the second lecture titled HSE Rules. In the second module, which is on operational safety of the online course titled Health Safety and Environmental Management in Offshore and Petroleum Engineering. Module 2 actually focuses on applications of safety practices in oil and gas industries. In the last lecture, we started introducing certain basic terminologies which are very common in HSE practice. Let us continue with that in this lecture as well, and also discuss certain rules and practices which are healthy for HSE to achieve better safety in operation and production, especially in oil and gas sector. Continuing with the definitions what we had in the last lecture. Contract actually is an agreement which is executed between two parties. This agreement binds both the parties legally to the terms and conditions of the contract. Contractor or contractors may be an individual or a company who is executing work under certain agreement. Which is generally between the contractor and the client. We already had a definition for client. We have also said why clientship is important in HSE practice. Usually the client is the oil and gas company itself. Let us come to more classical definitions. Hazard. We already said even in module 1, hazard actually is a scenario. So, a physical effect or a condition with the potential to harm people, property and or the environment. So, in general, hazard is actually a condition or a scenario. HSE of course stands for Health, Safety and Environment. Basically, this is a guideline to ensure safe operations keeping in mind the social responsibilities of the company. This is recognized as integral part of the policy of the company. So, HSE policy becomes an integral part of the management system. So, let us say I want to assess the HSE capability. What do I mean by this? It is nothing but a method to check the potential hazards or the contractors who could cause potential hazards. When you do this checking, it should be relevant to their work methods, experience, qualified manpower, etc. Qualified manpower to undertake the assigned job. So, you got to assess that. It also assesses the capabilities to assess and manage risk. Let us see what is an HSE plan. HSE plan is a definitive plan including in interface topics. Which sets out the complete system of HSE management for a particular contract. More interestingly, let us talk about what is an incident. An incident is an event or chain of events which has caused or likely to cause injury to people and damage to the assets. It will also include something called near miss events. They are very important. The incident is likely to happen, but have not happened. So, they are called near miss events. So, please understand, incident is different from accident. Incident is only an event or chain of events which has caused or likely to cause illness or damage. Then what is accident? Very interesting, it is a maturity of incident, we will talk about that. Inspection. Inspection is again a system of checking that an operating system is in place. System of checking that an operating system in place is safe or not. Usually this is done by or through a checklist. So, you have important do's and don'ts, and the manager carries a checklist, goes for inspection and completes the checklist and reports. Very importantly, periodic inspections in HSE are form or part of the audit. They are form or part of the audit report. It is very important. So, you cannot ignore periodic inspection reports. There is something called interface. It is a document or a documented identification of relevant gaps which will include the roles and responsibilities and actions. Okay. This will identify what? The different HSE management systems, when interface is added to an HSE plan, which will connect the roles and responsibilities of various officers present in the chain of contract as a part of interface, then it will provide a good information to the operating system, to manage all aspects of HSE related to that particular contract. So, in terms of efficiency and correctness, interface is important. Leading indicator, it is a measure if adopted helps to improve the performance. It could be skill identification of an employee, skill identification of perfection of a machinery, operating conditions of any given machinery and equipments, etc. Subcontractor, he can be an individual or a company again or a group of people performing some of the work of the contract, not all but partly. It may be related to, the work may be related to the original client or the contractor. they are also bound by HSE rules of the client. They do also have to follow all the HSE practices insisted by the client. Third party, because we used to often say HSE is a third party audit. It can be again individuals or group of people. Other than the principal contractor. Who may be affected or likely to be affected or involved in the contract. Toolbox meeting. This is actually a periodic meeting conducted by the workforce. At the workplace itself, not in the office, it is in the site. What does it do? To discuss HSE norms or HSE hazards that may be encountered during operation. It also discuss methods to manage these hazards and to plan for periodic training in managing such hazards. Generally, toolbox meetings are held in the morning or start of every shift. Toolbox meetings record important observations, which is a vital part of the routine inspection report. What is the primary objective of toolbox meeting? To create awareness and to improve the preparedness for hazard management. Sometimes earlier we talked about incident and hazard is a scenario. Incident is actually a part which can or a probable tentative item or a work or a method which can cause risk to the given system. We will now talk about accident. This refers to a single or sequence of events. Which has produced unintended loss. This refers only to, please understand, the occurrence of the events. And not their magnitude. This is very important. Does not talk about the magnitude at all, it only talks about the occurrence. It means frequency, let us talk about loss prevention. It is prevention of hazard occurrence through proper hazard identification, assessment and elimination. We already said what is an hazard. Hazard is a chemical or physical condition. We also said what is an incident. Incident is the loss of material or energy and its likelihood. Please understand, all incidents do not become accidents. Whereas accident is a singular sequence of events which has produced definitely an unintended loss. But still, even in accident description, we do not talk about the magnitude, we only talk about the occurrence or frequency of occurrence of the incident, consequence. It is a measure of expected effects. On the result of an incident. So, consequence is initially related to incident. Then what is risk? Risk is a measure of magnitude of damage and its probability of occurrence. So, please understand, the probability of occurrence data is fed from the accident. Accident does not talk about the magnitude, risk talks about magnitude. So, risk is connected to accident, consequence connected to incident. So, one can easily see risk is superior than consequence, consequence is milder compared to risk. In other words, the product of chance of occurrence of specific event and the severity of consequence together is what we call risk. So, risk is nothing but the product of the consequence or severity multiplied by the probability of occurrence or frequency of occurrence. So, this gives me the magnitude and frequency. One can ask me, how does it give me the magnitude? As I said in the beginning, in offshore industries, effects are always measured on indirect phase. When we talk about environmental management, we never wanted to measure the concentration of pollution, dispersion coefficients directly on the water or maybe in the atmosphere. We are always interested in measuring the consequences caused because of the pollution in terms of marine culture. Similarly, here, though we are interested in measuring the magnitude of damage, we really wanted to know what is the consequence caused by the damage, maybe on the asset, maybe on the human being, maybe on the environment. So, consequence or severity multiplied by probability of occurrence, which is again a part of risk, which is not a part of accident, together will give me risk. So, here interestingly, if you try to express the consequences on a relative value, this gives me qualitative risk assessment. If you express the risk in quantitative value, in absolute terms, in terms of money, in terms of dollar, whatever may be the case, it gives me quantitative risk assessment. So, risk assessment can be carried out in two formats. Both are unfortunately called as QRA. One is qualitative, other is quantitative. You can quantify risk in terms of number, you can qualify risk in terms of a relative scale. Okay, very interesting. So, risk is the ultimatum to understand violation of safety. Hazard is an indication of likelihood of violation of safety. So, two things are entirely different. We should not get confused with hazard and risk. Hazard is a scenario, it is a condition. Risk is a maturity of an incident which arises because of the hazard situation, but however materializes to cause a potential damage of a good magnitude either to human being or to asset or to environment or all of them. So, that is what risk is. So, the ultimate measure of violation of safety should be rather given in terms of risk. However, one can also measure hazard at that level itself and try to control hazard. So, risk can also be controlled, hazard can also be managed. So, there are different levels, different terms, different conditions, different methods, different tools, different mode of understanding of risk aversion mitigation control, hazard assessment monitoring and control, which we will see in the down the lectures subsequently in the modules. Let us continue with the discussion now. So, risk analysis is actually a quantitative estimate of risk using engineering tools and mathematical techniques. It involves estimation of hazard, probability of occurrence or the combination of both. So, it can be either qualitative or quantitative, whereas hazard analysis, so we already said risk analysis can be quantitative, qualitative. There are different tools, we will see them later. Hazard analysis is actually an identification of undesired events that can lead to potential hazard. So, hazard analysis primarily focuses on identification of the event itself, whereas risk analysis deals with understanding the consequences caused by those events which have created a definite damage. So, possibly risk analysis can be a post accident information, hazard analysis can be a preemptive accident information. So, hazard prevention is a very effective method, risk mitigation is a very effective control. So, two things, I mean, they are going parallel, but however there is always a bridge which is getting expanded between them as we go ahead in the forward direction. So, hazard analysis includes analysis of mechanisms by which these undesired events could occur. It also includes the estimation of extent, magnitude and likelihood of the event. Now, there is a confusion here, causing harmful effects. The confusion is hazard analysis also talks about estimation of magnitude, likelihood, that is frequency, which is causing the potential damage. Risk analysis also talks about magnitude and frequency. Then what is the difference? Please understand, gentlemen and ladies, hazard analysis only talks about undesired events which are likely to have or cause a potential hazard. There is no occurrence of the event. The events may likely occur, it is an anticipation, whereas risk deals with the occurred events. The damage is caused. For sure it has happened, the damage has caused. Since the damage has caused, there is a definite number of frequency of such damages being caused by certain specific events. So, risk analysis is more intrinsically mathematical, whereas hazard analysis is more intrinsically science level. This is a guess, that is a reality. So, one should be interested in risk analysis rather than hazard analysis. But unfortunately, hazard and risk are interconnected. How? If the conditions prevailing in the system is not corrected and the safety norms are violated, hazard will get matured to become a risk. So, they are connected. So, the connection between them is nothing but the HSE practices. Now, when HSE was first introduced as a part of the integral algorithm in the management policies of stakeholders of oil and gas sector, what was the initial reaction and how an HSE should have been defined? So, we would like to look at the history of HSE introduction. It is very important, because to know the mistakes you always look at the history. So, let us see this quickly. So, initially when HSE rules or practices were introduced, they get divided as they proceed forward. Goal setting regimes have a duty holder who assesses the risk. There is a responsible person what we call as a duty holder who assesses the risk. The expectation from this program was it should demonstrate understanding of risk, its severity and management. And very importantly, it should upkeep with the occurrences of events then and there. So, this involves a constant update to the workforce. If you look at the loose rule based regime, it consists of a legislator, maybe an administrator, who sets the rules. You are only requested or ordered to follow the rules. So, this program actually emphasizes compliance rather than outcomes. I mean, it does not bother about the benefit, what you achieve by following those so called HSE rules, but it says that you must follow the rules. So, compliance is insisted, outcomes are not traced. So, now the interesting part, the deficiency in this is there is no constant upkeep or update from the lessons learnt. Because even if you know there are some modifications required in the rules cannot be changed because they are made by a legislator. Whereas in this case, the workforce is constantly educated, it is updated. Therefore, if you really wanted to make certain changes in the HSE practices or rules and regulations, you can always have a feed forward and you can change them. So, constant update is possible. Now, what is the weakness of this rule? The weakness of this rule is, since there is no rule based on which you have to follow, there is no order, there is no legislation, people may not follow this intrinsically, they may take it this very casually. Whereas in this case, if you do not follow the rules, the legislator will impose penalty. So, you are bound to follow the rules. So, if you want to have an HSE practice based on rule based regime, your rule should be foolproof. If you really wanted to have a practice of HSE based on goal based regime, then your rules need to be dynamic. Therefore, if your company follows this kind of materialism, then HSE practices based on this may not be uniform along and across the globe, because every practice, every update, every training program, every demonstration, every workforce are different. If the company follows a rule based regime, this can ensure a uniformity along and across all the stakeholders or oil and gas industries in the globe. So, there are some beneficialization of globalization in rule based regimes of HSE practice, but there are some missing points which has to be taken care from the goal based regime. So, a good safety program should integrate both, and HSE practices should be based on both kinds of rules and regimes which are followed, which we will discuss in the subsequent lectures. Thank you very much.